The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
This is Gerard with episode number 55 of Florida's Fresh Mix on the Florida Podcast Network, a random mix of Florida's freshest personalities. Listen in.
Hello, Fresh Mixers. Welcome back to Florida's Fresh Mix podcast. You already know what time it is. It's Fresh Mix Friday, and we are so happy you are here with us. And by we, I'm talking about myself. My name is Amber. I am the lead content producer of the Florida Podcast Network. And of course, who else would be here with me than your host, Gerard? Gerard, hello. What's up?
How's it going? I'm totally keyed in to this episode.
Everyone's like, what is he saying? Well, if you read the title of this episode, you'll get it. But basically, today's entire episode is completely devoted to the Florida Keys. And we have two wonderful guests here to talk about their Florida Keys Traveler podcast. So today we have Elizabeth Harryman Lasley and Jason Paton, and they are part of the team at Armchair Productions, which produced the 30-episode series. Yeah, 30-episode series that's all about the Florida Keys. And it's actually celebrating the 200th anniversary of Monroe County. So just to give you a little bit of a background, like service level, because Gerard, I know you and the guest really dive into this entire podcast series. But basically, the real anniversary is in July, but leading up to that date, these guys are releasing 2 new episodes every week. So right now, I believe they're on episode 23, 24.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm.
So there's only a couple left to come out, and you won't want to miss them. They do dive into so many different topics that revolve around the Florida Keys. All right, Gerard, see, you can tell I'm already getting so excited. I've never been, or I'll say this, it's been a while since I've been this excited about a topic on this show. Gerard, please stop me.
To each his own. I mean, I get excited every week, but and last week last week I interviewed my significant other, so that was pretty exciting. And I'm going to use the word exciting in a neutral way, because just making sure I didn't get in trouble.
Nice.
So, but no, I hear you. This was an amazing opportunity to hear more about a place that I've been multiple times, and talking to Elizabeth and Jason was a great opportunity to learn much more about the breadth and depth and the history of the Keys as a whole.
Absolutely. And when you guys listen to Elizabeth and Jason talk about the Florida Keys, you would swear that they were locals, but they are not. They're not even Floridians. Uh-oh.
Yep. Well, we'll get into that. And you'll totally forgive them.
Yes. I mean, if we can make an exception, so can you.
There you go.
All right. I don't want to give too much away, so we're just going to dive into it. But actually, before we dive into it, Gerard, this is the time where you can tell the people all about Guitars Over Guns.
Why, thank you, Amber. As our devoted Fresh Mixers already know, for the past 3 years, I've proudly served on the board of directors of Guitars Over Guns. GoGo is an incredibly impactful nonprofit organization that offers students from disadvantaged communities in Miami, Chicago, and Los Angeles a powerful combination of music education and strong mentoring relationships with professional musicians to help them overcome hardship, find their voice, and reach their potential as tomorrow's leaders. Please head to the show notes for more information, and most importantly, to donate. And by the way, speaking of music, in this episode, you'll hear about playing music through a conch shell. That's all I got to say about that.
Exactly. Yeah, people, the donation link is in the show notes. It will always be there. Go do the right thing. And then once you donate, come back to this episode and listen to Gerard's amazing conversation between Elizabeth, Harryman Lasley, and Jason Paton of the Florida Keys Traveler podcast series.
Keys, please. All right, Fresh Mixers. Today I am super excited because we get to delve into a topic that is super Florida. Now, I remember back in episode 33 when we interviewed Pat Rose, my producer Amber and I were like, this is the most Florida topic we could ever talk about because we were talking about manatees and manatee preservation and everything manatee related, right? But now, today, we are talking about something super Florida as well, which is the Florida Keys. I have been to the Keys several times. I love the Keys. And now I get to interview two people who know the Keys very intimately because they started and created the Florida Keys Traveler podcast, which is actually still ongoing. And I cannot wait to talk to these folks. First of all, we've got Jason Paton, who is the field producer for the Florida Keys Traveler podcast. Jason, how you doing, my brother?
Not bad at all. Thank you so much for having us.
All right. Now, Jason is the production lead at Armchair Productions, which produces the podcast. He's also an audio producer. He's a mixer. He's an engineer. He's also, I'm going to give him props. He's the winner of the Tribeca Film Festival Best Podcast Award in 2021 for his sound production on National Geographic's Guardians of the River. Okay. Guardians of the River podcast, I should say. Jason, are you based out of Boulder?
Yep, I live in Boulder. Our company's based out of Louisville, Colorado, just down the road.
Okay, we'll forgive you because even though you don't live in Florida, you've done like the most gangsta Florida thing by producing this podcast. So that's totally fine. Okay.
Excellent.
Now, last but definitely not least, and you know, I was raised right. I generally believe in ladies first, but this time I want to introduce the host, Elizabeth Harryman Lasley. I'm purposefully mentioning her second because, Elizabeth, we both know that the host is the core of the show. Nobody's more important. Okay. So I'm giving you your flowers. All right. So Elizabeth, how's it going?
It's going great, Gerard. Thank you so much for having us. It is an honor to be on your show.
All right. So from presenta to presenta, I'm just saying, listen, I'm so happy to have you here. Elizabeth, I'm going to give you your flowers too. She is a travel journalist. She's also the co-founder of ontravel.com. She's the former on-air travel correspondent for NBC's Today Show. All right. And are you based out of California?
Yes, I live in San Juan Capistrano, California. So this is a production. It's a production about the Florida Keys. We did the field recording in the Florida Keys, but Jason, the production company is in Colorado. The host is in Southern California. So it's very much of the 21st century. So I'm not a Florida native or a Keys native, but I do know the Keys, have traveled to the Keys quite a bit, love the Keys, and kind of get the Keys, if you know what I mean. Understand the Keys, because the Keys are very special and you have to kind of understand them. And for this particular podcast, they didn't want somebody who actually was based in the Keys. They wanted the visitor perspective. They wanted, because the name of the podcast is Florida Keys Traveler. So they wanted the visitor perspective, but obviously they wanted someone who knew the Keys. And when they decided to do the podcast, the person who was behind it, Andy Newman of Newman Public Relations, they do public relations for the Florida Keys. He was a big fan of my late husband and we did several radio shows together. He was always a fan of our radio shows. So
my condolences, by the way. I've seen many posts on your social media and pictures with your lovely husband. So my condolences there.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, and it's, I have to say this podcast has kind of been a lifesaver for me because when Paul died, we were still doing daily radio shows for the American Forces Network. When Paul died, I stopped that and I didn't know what I was going to do with the rest of my life. Catlin Thomas, Dylan Thomas's wife, wrote a book called Leftover Life to Live. And that's kind of the way I felt. But Andy Newman called me and said, the 200th anniversary of the Florida Keys are coming up. I want to do a podcast about it, and I want you to be the host. And, it's the kind of thing Paul and I would have loved doing together, but I felt it was a message, God was telling me, I have a job for you to do, and you have to step up to the plate and do it in honor of Paul. And I feel he is looking over my shoulder on every episode.
Well, that's beautiful, and I believe that everything happens the way it's supposed to, and if this is a lifeline for you, and it's happening just the way it's supposed to, so I think that that's beautiful. How did this whole project come about? Because I have so many wonderful things to praise you guys about with respect to this podcast. I really want to know how this happened.
Two non-Florida people putting together this. Well, and I have to say, I'm very proud of it too. I'm very proud of the work, but I have to say the people at Armchair Productions are a dream to work with. And we had never worked before. we had never even met before. Because
No, that was the very unique part of this production for me as well. It kind of changed the whole tone of it entirely. Normally we do all of our productions, like in-house is the wrong word because they're always on location in these different destinations. But usually it's just our core team, me and Aaron Miller, the leader of our company, out in the field somewhere.
Yes, shout out to Aaron who did the initial interview with my producer Amber and brought us all together. So shout out to him. And you know what? I'm going to go even further. I mean, Aaron is no slouch. He's an award-winning travel writer, photographer, editor, journalist. He's the founder of Armchair Productions, which produces this podcast. So props to Aaron. Thank you, my brother. So anyway,
props to Aaron. He's a great dude. And I was honestly, I was a little scared and a little skeptical when he said, you're going to be sent out with someone you've never met before. You're going to be on the road. Liz, how long were we on the road? 10 days, 11 days?
About 10 days. Had never seen each other before and spending, 14-hour days together driving through the Florida Keys.
You meet in the car rental line at the airport.
I hope you guys got along.
Oh, we had a blast. You get your routine down, and they are hard. Those trips are like, it's fun. It's a blast being in these very beautiful destinations, but it's a working trip throughout the whole thing. You're meeting as many people as you just possibly can fit into the course of a day, and just trying to capture them all as best as you possibly can. And every location, every guest is such a unique environment. It's all a different soundscape. It's all a different recording challenge, whether we're off kayaking, whether we're off, hiking somewhere, or walking through restaurants, or in the back in the kitchen of restaurants, or everything is a different, or on a boat somewhere, or wherever it might be. They're exciting trips, and the Florida Keys in particular was a favorite of mine.
So how did this all come about? How were you guys all brought together? Non-Floridians. Who was the genesis of this? Who was patient zero?
I would say patient zero would be Andy Newman of Newman PR. They have done public relations for the Florida Keys for about 40 years. And with the 200th anniversary coming up, they wanted to do something really special. And I think it was Laura Myers, who is a part of Newman PR, was the one who really said, we should be doing a podcast. And she was the one, I believe, who found Armchair Productions. I think they found Armchair Productions. They definitely hired Armchair Productions before they hired me. As you mentioned, Armchair is this award-winning production company. And the whole thing is sponsored, I guess. I don't know if it's the correct word, but the entity behind it is the Monroe County Tourist Development Council. That, because the Florida Keys are part of Monroe County, or Monroe County encompasses the Florida Keys, I should say. So that's who's really behind it. But I think the creative people were Andy Newman and Laura Myers, that put the creative team together, that put me together with Armchair Productions. And then they helped us find the people to interview. And the people we interviewed were just amazing.
Sounds like it. Yes, I've listened to several episodes.
Yeah, like Mandy Rodriguez at the Dolphin Research Center, and Clayton Lopez with Bahama Village. He is the city commissioner for District 6 of Key West, which is the district where Bahama Village is. I mean, it's interesting. We were talking about, Jason was saying, yes, we were both so exhausted at the end of the day, working really hard, but also energized because we knew we were killing it. Right, Jason?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had days where, you're walking away from interviews where there's tears, often happy tears, or, the tears of people that are realization tears or whatever it might be. But we were getting into very emotive topics, things that are very, very personal to people. And you're walking away from these interviews really thinking that you're capturing real stories from real people in ways that really do matter.
So we knew we had some golden stuff. And then, of course, when we get back home, basically I write the scripts, which just means pulling excerpts from the different interviews and weaving it all together into these, because it's a series of 30 podcasts in all. 2 a week are dropping until July 3rd, which is the actual anniversary date of the 200th anniversary when Monroe County was established. So we got back and we had all this amazing material. And then it was my job to kind of figure out, okay, how to weave it all together, because it was like trying to fit together a giant jigsaw puzzle, because we all wanted it to be not just here's one interview, here's another interview. It had to be organic so that one episode could flow into another to tell the story of the Florida Keys. And I think, a lot of people who are not familiar with the Keys think of it as just a pretty place. And it's a gorgeous place. But there's so much more. And of course it has the world-class sport fishing and all of this. But as Jason was saying, the stories behind the stories, especially for the 200th anniversary, we wanted to delve into the history, the environmental history, the social history, all the cultural history. Why was it such a draw for writers like Hemingway and Tennessee Williams? All these different, it was like a huge mosaic that we had to fit together. And then Jason is like this world-class producer / sound designer. Yeah, no, he is. So he's the one who then puts it all together and makes it sound wonderful.
So as you mentioned, it is 30 episodes, but that's a bit more daunting than it actually is, because these are only like 15 minutes on average, I would say, per episode. And I just love it. These little bite-sized episodes, but you pack so much into it. And the way that the website describes kind of the theme of the show is that you quote unquote dive into the history, natural wonders, and attractions that make the Keys one of the most iconic destinations worldwide. And what I love about that is, and we'll talk about the length of the episodes in a second, but as someone who's been to the Keys many times, initially because I went with my family as a kid, but then also my former law firm, we would have our summer retreat there every year, but it was all the same type of thing, hanging out on the main strip, which reminds me a lot of Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and kind of eating and just hanging out on that one street.
In Key West, you're talking about.
In Key West, right. So I never really experienced the breadth of what the Keys had to offer, because I was always there for a specific reason that had to do with, just basically having a good time and being as liquefied as possible.
we all understand that.
Yes. But not only do you talk about so many other aspects of the Keys, but also it's just the rich history. I mean, that is what really, really gets to me. And Jason, I got to give you your props because you feel like you're there. You hear all the sounds. I'm on the boat. I'm in the restaurant. I feel it. I mean, it's,
that's lovely.
It's absolutely so well done. And what I love about it is that it's still ongoing. So I think you guys are like maybe about 23 episodes in, give or take, and depending on when this is released. So you still have more episodes to go. What was the thinking behind the 15-minute kind of shot glass of episodes?
Yeah, I would say the mentality behind that was it was about concentrating, all the good material together that we could. It became a real challenge trying to condense things down that far because you get these lovely conversations with people. When Liz was talking about Clayton Lopez that we walked around Bahama Village with, we spent hours with him, and then to try to turn that into a 15-minute piece that's still, we're not going to hyper focus in on just one thing. We want to tell, usually there's multiple guests per episode that are telling different sides of the same topic, really spreading that around. So trying to condense it down is a unique challenge. But I think the thinking there is just trying to stay concise and hyper-focused and not, no dead air and no dwelling longer than it needs to be. It's punchy. That's what it's going for. And I think that that's also somewhat reflective of the energy of the Keys. There's certainly places to go relax and to lounge around. But when we were there, wherever we were, you could just feel that pulsating energy that runs beneath the Keys. So like keeping the episodes propulsive, just kind of fit. It also, that also influences the musical sound direction, the more energetic music that we're putting into a production like this. It's about trying to match the vibe of a place, and that was our goal. And it seems like definitely some people are a fan of the way that ended up turning out.
No, listen, mission accomplished. And Jason, let me ask you: had you ever had any connection with the Keys prior to this, or had you ever even been there?
Yeah, I was in Key West as a kid, and it's a very different place as a kid, for sure. So it was very, very liberating to go back and actually get to take advantage of, to go in and enjoy some of the wonderful bars that y'all have down there, and to not have to have my parents sign waivers to do all the exciting things that we got to do. That was refreshing. So yeah, I'd been there as a kid, but it's just entirely different to come back with, a giant set of microphones, and you're trying to capture the immersive sound of a space. Like, it really makes you think about the locations that you're in very differently and experience them very differently when you're listening to the sounds of the seagulls, or whether it's the sound of the waves coming in, or hyper focusing in on the birds when you're in a mangrove, like a tunnel of mangroves out on a kayak in the ocean. And it's very, very different than, and the types of touristies. Like my mom, I love my mom. She took us all over the place as a kid. She's more of the type of, let's go find the world's largest ball of string out wherever that might be as a tourist destination.
Nice.
I'm more on the, I like the path that we took on the podcast, and that you can follow along with us on Florida Keys Traveler.
And Elizabeth, how about you? How many times had you been to the Keys before, and what was your purpose in going? Was it business, pleasure, both, or,
Well, as a travel journalist, well, actually I did go to like Jason, I was there once as a kid because I grew up in Indiana. I do remember going with my dad, because my dad died when I was 8. So I would have had to been, before I was 8. I remember driving down with my mother and daddy and my brother Wayne, driving down that overseas highway. And I remember that's such a beautiful drive. And it is still gorgeous drive. But then as an adult going back, it was mostly for work, because I am a travel journalist, and my husband and I would travel together, and we were writers and also doing our radio shows. So it was mostly for work. But what I would like to emphasize is, you mentioned that most of your experience in the Florida Keys, it sounds like up until now has been in Key West. But I think don't rush down. I think then this is one of Jason's favorite mantras too. Don't just rush down the overseas highway. Stop along the way, because the upper Keys, the middle Keys are so full of interesting things. Like there's a turtle hospital in Marathon where you can, they rescue turtles, and you can watch them, giving them a back rub.
You have an episode about that. I saw that.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes. And there is the John Pennekamp Coral Reef State Park in Key Largo. And also in Key Largo, you can ride the African Queen, the actual African Queen that was in the movie, The African Queen.
Yep.
You can actually ride that boat and go out into the ocean and the canals of Key Largo and learn about the Keys film history, because, a lot of films, a lot of movies have been either set in the Keys or shot in the Keys. But interestingly, a lot of movies that were set in the Keys were not filmed in the Keys, like Key Largo. I think there's only one or two outdoor scenes that were ever even filmed in Key Largo. So, but there are all these interesting places. And then there's Big Pine Key, and there's a place where you can see key deer, endangered species key deer, these little deer that are only about the size of a German Shepherd. And they're,
Oh, wow.
they're so adorable. We actually saw one on Summerland Key, and it's like beautiful.
Did you see it randomly, or like at a zoo or
Just
something?
randomly. He was,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Cause we were actually, we have an episode about the man what is it? Jason, the man with a
million grandchildren. Yeah, that's what we call him.
I want to talk to you guys about that, because the title is a little bit misleading. But anyway, go ahead.
Yes,
go ahead. I was going to bring that up, but go ahead.
Yes, but he is a man who is with the Plant a Million Corals Foundation. One of the other things about the Florida Keys, again, it is so beautiful, but they really try to preserve the nature of the Keys. Like all of the water around you, if you go into the water any place in the Keys, you're in the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. So you're in protected waters. And about 5 miles off of the Keys, there is the Florida Reef. It's the only, big reef like that in the continental United States. And it basically protects the Florida Keys. So the people in the Keys care very much about preserving that reef, because without that reef, it protects them from harsh waters. It protects them from hurricanes. It fosters fish. So without the reef, they really wouldn't have tourism. So you can go in Coral Reef, John Pennekamp Coral Reef State Park. You can snorkel there or go scuba diving there and see the reef and see all the sea life. So there is so much to do all along the way in the Florida Keys that by the time you get to Key West, it's just the cherry on the top of the key lime pie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one theme that really comes across in your podcast, which I really appreciate, because I think the only other key, I mean, we've got Key Biscayne right here, and I live in South Beach, so it's right here. I don't think that really counts, but I've had dinner at Key Largo maybe, but I haven't really experienced these other keys. And what your podcast does is it really walks you through everything that all the different keys have to offer. But more specifically, you were talking about the coral reef. I mean, you have an entire episode dedicated to that. You mentioned the man with a million grandchildren. I saw that, my eyes lit up, and I thought it was going to be about something totally different. And you also have another episode, how dolphins are saving humans in the Florida Keys. Is part of what you're trying to accomplish, is there any kind of climate change or save the planet agenda, or does it kind of just come out, that message just come out organically?
I wouldn't call it an agenda, but it is definitely a mission. Well, maybe it is an agenda of the people of the Keys. I mean, because every place, it isn't, wouldn't you say so, Jason? Everybody we talk to, they care about the environment because they realize it is crucial to their survival. Wouldn't you say, Jason?
Yeah, it's a place that's very, very, when you dig into the history of the Keys, what you find is the different eras that you divide it into are kind of broken up by hurricanes, by things like that. So it's a place that's very, very affected by climate and climate change. And yeah, people there are definitely hyper aware of how environments are changing and what they need to do to protect that place that is so fragile. It's an island system built on a coral reef. It extremely, extremely fragile system.
And the other thing that you sense is that there's a tremendous sense of community. And I think it goes back, we interviewed Craig Cates, the mayor of Monroe County, and he was saying that really from the beginning, before there was the highway, for a short time there was the railroad, which is a whole other story. We have a whole episode about that. But when the Keys first started, the only way you got to and from was by boat, and you're cut off from the mainland. And so from the beginning, they learned to depend on each other because, you can't depend on the mainland. You're all cut off. You're by yourself down there. So they learned to depend on each other. So there's a great sense of community, I think. And the other thing is that, when you leave the mainland, you just have it's like a whole different atmosphere. You kind of feel like anything is possible. And we talked to more than one person who said, oh, I just came for a weekend vacation. And here they are 40 years later, either, working with the turtles, or they started a dive shop, or they started a restaurant, or, you know what I mean? There's something about the Keys that's just, it really is unique. And I don't use that word very often.
In the Keys, I can't think of a single instance where I met someone who wasn't kind. And so when you're talking about community, I totally get it from my experience in the Keys. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the kindness there?
Well, it's certainly reflected in the motto of the Keys. One human family has for a while now been the official motto of the Keys themselves, and we have an episode that digs into that.
One human family, all about unity, equality, diversity.
We have got a couple T-shirts that we were lucky enough to come back from the trip with, right, Liz?
Yeah, no, it just seems like. Did you want to add something, Elizabeth?
I think the Keys pride themselves on welcoming everyone. It's a little like they say the same thing, similar thing about Alaska. It doesn't matter what you did on the mainland. It doesn't matter what job you had. It doesn't matter. It only matters what you do in the Keys. All races, all ethnic groups, and the Keys. Again, from the beginning, because Key West itself, of course, is deep water port, and a lot of ports. There was all different influence. There's the Bahamians, Cubans, Europeans, because the indigenous people, but they most trace of the indigenous people have gone by now. But it was kind of a melting pot of different ethnic groups. So LGBTQ plus, it's Key West was a pioneer in LGBTQ plus tourism. So they really pride themselves on welcoming everyone, that one human family. And now throughout history, it hasn't always been that way, but they are striving for it.
And everything you just said is so beautifully highlighted in various episodes of your podcast. I mean, you do highlight this is all plugs for your podcast. So,
we're so happy.
You have an episode that really talks about and highlights how the Keys played an instrumental role. Well, it is Pride Month now, and kind of being a hub for the Pride movement. And then you have another episode dedicated to racial issues, historical racial issues, which actually, as a Black man, hit home in certain ways. But I left that episode feeling more positive rather than dwelling or wallowing in any kind of negativity or resentment towards the past because of the way that the episode was presented. History is history and facts are facts. And that's just a testament to the way that you guys really dealt with some of those tough issues in such an honest and revealing way. So props to you on all of that. I just had to take a moment to say that.
Yeah, we were just very lucky to have incredibly knowledgeable and influential people to talk to when we were down there. Like, for instance, when we were walking through Bahama Village in Key West, Clayton Lopez, just, everybody you'd pass on the street knows this guy, and everyone wants to, go up and give him a high five or wave if they're passing in their car or whatever it is. But these are change makers as well that are doing everything they can to better their communities around them, because the issues that you were mentioning, they're not ancient history, and there's still the work that has to be done on all of those fronts, and to have the opportunity to speak to the people that are helping to make those improvements happen. It was a privilege, and it is, I think, as you said, the message that you walk away from is one of positivity and hope for the future.
Yes, and thank you very much. That means a lot, Gerard, for you to say that.
Yeah, I mean, so I just wanted to take a moment to ask you, were there episodes that either one of you found to be particularly challenging?
Ooh, I mean, I would say all of them were challenging from audio perspectives, I would say, for all the different environments. But as far as the topics themselves,
well, I wouldn't like to be in a boat doing an interview. That's just me. But it comes off so well, and Elizabeth is like the consummate professional. But I'm just saying, I love being in my living room right now.
Yes.
But anyway, go ahead. Jason.
Oh yeah. What episode? I mean, that was its own challenge of its own. So, like, speaking from a producer perspective, you roll up to the African Queen boat, this famous boat from the movie. It is a noisy, it's a restored boat, so it's quite noisy, old fashioned, and we had how many different guests on that boat that were all talking to us at the same time, Liz?
3 different people plus me. So
yeah,
it was
we had the film commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
We had the boat captain himself, who was a character on the episode. We had the owner of the boat that partly behind the restoration project itself. So trying to, in that environment, juggle between talking to all these different people at once, and then meanwhile getting Liz behind the wheel to be piloting the boat out on the open ocean and the excitement of that. The minute you hit the open ocean from the canal system, you've got gale force winds hitting you from the ocean itself, and that overwhelming the microphone. So that challenging, but the topics themselves, some of those can be extremely challenging. For example, we did a beachfront interview at the location of the African cemetery in Key West. And what was the name of the person that we were interviewing there, Liz?
Corey Malcolm.
Corey Malcolm. I think he's the head historian
for
Key
the
West.
Florida Keys History Center.
For the History Center, yeah. So talking about this extremely, extremely heavy topic where you had enslaved people that were, being shipped in. I think it was being shipped into Cuba. I think it was, Liz.
Well, what happened? I mean, again, it's a terrible chapter in America's history, although in this case, the American government was trying to do the right thing because the traffic in slavery had been abolished by 1860 when this happened. It was the early 1800s. The actual slave traffic had been abolished, but some American people would still go to Africa, capture people, and take them to Cuba, because the slave traffic had not been abolished yet in Cuba. And so what the U.S. Navy did was that they sent ships to patrol Cuba and try to intercept those ships to stop that slave trade. And in 1860, they basically, what happened was they captured 3 of those ships and brought the people to Key West. And each ship had about 500 enslaved, formerly people that they were trying to enslave, about 500 people aboard. They brought them to Key West because it was the nearest U.S. port. And they basically told the U.S. Marshal, you have to take care of these people. So they built a compound right where we were on at Higgs Beach now in Key West. And it had a hospital, it had a barracks, had a kitchen. And so they took care of them. And then most of them, they sent then back to Liberia. And I remember asking Corey, I said, well, did they give them an option to stay? And he said, no, which I thought was, that wasn't very nice. But then I thought about it because Florida was a southern state. So actually, if they had stayed in Key West, they might not have been safe. So maybe that we're taking that into consideration as well. But then what happened was, because of course the conditions on the slave ships were so terrible, 295 of the people that were on those ships died. And so they were buried there. So in 2002, they looked for those graves and they found them. And then they basically built a memorial, which is now on the National Register of Historic Places of the African Cemetery. But so you asked me that was probably the most challenging episode because we wanted to do that with sensitivity and make sure we had our facts right and all of that. But another interesting thing, Key West was the southernmost city in the southernmost state during the Civil War. But during the Civil War, and there were 3 forts in Key West and another fort, Fort Jefferson, west of Key West. All 4 of those forts stayed in Union hands throughout the Civil War. And they actually were very effective. What happened, as it looked like Florida was going to go toward a secession, basically the Army troops marched from the barracks into the forts, took over the forts, put up the American flag and said, this is Union, and it stayed Union throughout the war. And then they were able to intercept ships that were they're trying to take supplies to the Confederacy. So they actually were able to do a lot of good against the Confederacy from the southernmost city and another irony to that, because of that, because I know we just recently celebrated Juneteenth, the Emancipation Proclamation was made in January 1st, 1863. In the Confederate States, of course, the people weren't telling the slaves the enslaved people that they were free.
Right.
But in Key West, which was under Union control, it did have an effect. Basically, the people who had been enslaved in Key West, they knew, maybe they were among the first people to know that they were now free because of that irony.
One of the sad things is that I first learned of Key West's role in the Civil War, everything you're describing, I first learned of that by listening to your podcast. And I'm a Black man, and I'm a nerd, and I'm deeply inquisitive to all things about American history in general, and then also obviously specifically relating to slavery and all those type of things. And your podcast is the first time I ever learned any of that history. And it's deeply emotional to think about these things. But at the end of the day, listening to that episode that you're describing and the information that I gleaned from it made me feel more hopeful and made me feel happy. It sounds weird, but I actually felt happy after listening to that episode.
Well, that makes that's very humbling to me for you to say that, Gerard. Thank you. And I do think there's hope, and I do think there's progress. And we have been inspired. I know Jason keeps mentioning Clayton Lopez, who is, oh my gosh, it was so inspiring. And so many other people that we met, like Rafael Peñalver, who's president of the San Carlos Institute. Have you been to did you hear that episode or been to the San Carlos Institute? It's the whole Cuban history of the Florida Keys is so fascinating.
Yeah, I haven't gotten there yet. I can't wait to get there.
No spoilers.
No spoilers, yes.
Well, again, it's just fascinating history.
My significant other is half Cuban, so I'm and you know I love the Cuban people. Look, I lived in South Beach for 22 years. How could you not love the Cuban people? I eat their food, I dance their dance. All right. So anyway,
yes, exactly. Yeah. So, but and again, Mandy Rodriguez and these scientists that are trying to, restore the reef and save the key deer. They're all so inspiring.
So let me ask you this. What is the most surprising thing that you've learned?
I learned a lot more about the Conch Republic, which is, so that's the other thing about the Keys is that I think that is surprising is the humor. Oh, I know. I remember. Okay. The most surprising thing. The Keys are quirky. I mean, the very fact that they have a Conch Republic is, that in itself is wonderful. But we learned about a place called the Toilet Seat Cut, which Brad
Wait, the what?
That's the name of it. It's called the Toilet Seat Cut. It's like a waterway, and it's around. It's in the Upper Keys someplace. We never actually saw it, I think. We just saw signs for it. And we asked this historian that took us out to Indian Key, Brad Bertelli, we said, what is the toilet seat cut? Well, it like many things in the Keys, it like started by accident. Oh, I think maybe it was after the filming of Bloodline. Somebody decorated a discarded toilet seat.
Great show, by the way. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, the television show about the Florida
Do you know if
Keys.
it was actually filmed in the Keys?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, because if it weren't, I was like, that looks exactly like the Keys. But anyway,
source straight out of the film commissioner's mouth on the boat of the African Queen. We can
That's
verify
right.
that one.
That's right.
All right, go ahead, Elizabeth. Sorry,
but then like different groups or communities would like decorate a toilet seat and put it up on a post, and it would be like, it's just like a quirky sense of fun, and because. People are very creative in the Keys, and this is just like a quirky kind of creativity. So when Brad Bertelli told us about the toilet seat cut, I remember saying, "Oh, that is so Keys."
I'd have to say surprising. I've got a couple, but they're all not nearly as articulate as Liz's answer. One is the predominance of chickens everywhere.
Yeah, right.
Near and about Key West. I didn't remember that from as a kid, but I certainly remember it now after working in the area on audio. It made editing a bit of a nightmare. There's just chickens calling everywhere.
Yeah, they're just chilling, walking around.
Yeah, and the different opinions, because you can't help but ask some of the people you're interviewing, like, because everyone's got a different one. What's your solution? Well, we should eat them all. What's your solution? Well, I love them. Like pets of the neighborhood. Whatever it is. So many different opinions on them. And the other most surprising thing I would say is in certain spots of the key, I just had no concept of just how narrow they are. Like so many of the places that we visited, you could throw a stone from one side of the ocean to the other side of on the opposite side of the road to the ocean over there, just all built on this extremely narrow strip of land on an old coral reef. So I think it has something to do with just how close knit people there are, because they are physically so close to each other. It's a tiny strip of land. So I found that very shocking. And the lack of beaches, honestly, for some reason, I expected Florida beaches everywhere, right? They must be. But no, it is not a beach place. It's a reef area. So very rocky.
That's true.
You definitely can find some beaches in some of the spots, but that's just not the norm. And that became like a unique sound design challenge. Normally you go to these beautiful locations and you're going to sound design with, the audio you record there of like beautiful waves coming in, the surf coming in, but those aren't the sounds that you really capture there. It's much more unique than that. So I found that very surprising.
I haven't thought about it until you just mentioned it. I mean, there are beaches if you want sand, but they're not. It's not like Miami Beach is like 20-minute walk from where I am right now. That's a beach, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to find that over there. Yeah, that is true. That is true.
And I'll throw one bonus answer because it's a quick one. Is I thought the conch blowing, which is when you perform those shells as an instrument, I thought that would be a novelty thing. And I grew up playing brass instruments, so I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about what was possible with wind instruments. And it's not a classical one. And we interviewed this gentleman. What was his name, Liz?
Clinton Curry, who played the conch for us.
He was a protege and saying instrument doesn't even do it justice. That guy, you could put him in a Philharmonic tomorrow and you wouldn't even know it's a conch. He's making the most beautiful sounds, perfect control over pitch and vibrato and dynamics, and so expressive with it. And the point was made really clear when we got to try. Wasn't it a bit of a, how many? Because we had to get that moment of Liz. She was taught how to play it.
I gotta say, before Liz comments, I have to say that not only was he amazing, but I thought that Elizabeth's birthday cake attempt was really, really impressive. And I thought she did a great job, for a first timer. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, now, if you haven't listened to the episode, my fresh mixers, you got to listen to this episode where Elizabeth attempts to play the conch for the first time. And I thought she did great. But when she tries, you realize how amazing this guy is in comparison.
Exactly.
But, kudos to Elizabeth.
Thank you. Well, I had to get at least one sound out.
Absolutely. And that absolutely happened. I can tell you from firsthand experience, there's no fakery. In fact, for the podcast in general, that was just an overall goal that we had. And one of my personal goals and how I approach sound design is it's all got to be real. It's all got to happen. It's all has to be on location. No mixing in library stock sounds or anything like that. So her note that we get out at the end that authentically have it took some tries that maybe we shortened down a little bit in the editing, but it absolutely happens. And it really, like you said, it just goes to show just how talented Mr. Curry was.
That's right.
He's amazing. All right. Lightning round. Before we wrap up, I've got a few personal questions I just want to ask you real quick.
Let's do it. First
of all, did anyone express any concern over the fact that there is that just one bridge? I mean, it's beautiful to go across that bridge. But then when you start to think about it, it's like, okay, it's just this one thin bridge, like that connects all the keys. Did anyone in your travels express any concern over like, what if the bridge breaks down or something happens? Like,
well, that's definitely an ongoing project. For example, in some spots, it's not just one bridge. When we were near, what was that? The key that we had to take the train into.
Pigeon Key.
Pigeon Key. So at Pigeon Key, you can see the old bridge right next to the new bridge. And they're actually trying to do a new one, a third one as well, like an even newer one. So it's definitely been an ongoing project. And it's so trippy to see the old one running parallel to the current I think it's a 7-mile bridge. Is that's right? Yeah.
Yep,
so it's very good Instagram opportunities, by the way. You just get that completely solitary abandoned bridge right there. So it's definitely not, and it's all been transformed from back when it used to be a railroad, and some of those sections had to be filled in to create artificial keys so that they could hop from one to the next to the next to the next. So it's been an endless project, I think, since the keys have been settled.
But nobody expressed concern, or they just kind of just ignore it.
They live with it. It's one road in, one road out. They know it, and they live with it.
The one thing that comes to mind when you talk about that, we were mentioning earlier how many people like go for a weekend and stay for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people too, it is just, this almost has like a negative sound to it, but I mean it in a positive way, where it's the end of the road in a very literal way. There are people that just needed to move, to go, to travel, hopped on the highway and didn't stop until the road ended in Key West itself. So it is, it's a road that a lot of people take, and a road where some people, when they get to the end, they just stop.
Yes. And again, the history, in a future episode, you're going to there were all these the kind of boom and bust cycles. Wrecking was there for a while, where you salvaged goods from ships that had wrecked. Then that fell down. Cigar industry, and there's sponge. So but they always came up. There's a resilience there. If something fails, they try something else, and they don't move away from the Keys, though. They stay and figure out something else. And also, I think that end of the road thing, Jason, that you're talking about, it's like there's been a lot of innovation in the Keys, like in the diving industry, learning about new helmets and rebreathers and that kind of stuff. A lot of innovation, because I think that kind of end of the road thing, okay, you can't go any further, but in a way it means anything is possible. And so it's a very creative atmosphere.
All right. Next question in the lightning round. So what, that wasn't very lightning like.
Sorry, we'll try to do better.
No, it's better. No, it's sure. Fine. It's fine. That was not a complaint, Elizabeth.
I know.
That was not
you
a complaint.
caught us. Podcasters love to talk.
All right. What is the best food you've had in the Keys and the best place you've been, and are they the same?
Oh, I got to jump in here. Keys Fisheries.
Yes.
Liz and I tried stone crab there. It was the first time that I'd ever had stone crab. And, I'm a big fan of lobster, other shellfish and stuff. It just
First time having stone crab. Wow.
Yes.
Oh, gosh. It was incredible. The only way I could describe it is it tasted, and I think I make a point of saying something like this in the episode, it tasted like the gentleman who we were interviewing at that moment, who was one of the owners of the fishery. It tasted like that gentleman took his hand, put it in the water, pulled out a stone crab, and handed it to me in that moment. And his response was essentially, that's basically what happened. It would have been in the ocean about 6 hours ago or something like that. Or it was caught that morning. It was so fresh. It was delicious. And thanks, Liz, for buying that. You got us a really helping of that stone crab.
Yes. And my answer is the same. And well, I had this stone crab claw without any sauce, and it just tasted like the ocean. And as I'm sure you know, Gerard, but you can eat stone crab without feeling guilty, because the crab grows another claw.
Yeah.
That is true. Little known fact. And which key is this place located?
This was in
Isla Morada, I think. Was it?
I'll tell you in a minute. I have it in my notes.
It was a Marathon, actually. I think it was in Marathon.
Was it Marathon?
Yeah.
Would you say that is your favorite place to go in the Keys, that restaurant?
Favorite place to go? I don't know. You could probably just take me to Big Pine Key and just leave me there. That was probably my favorite place to be. So incredibly beautiful in the mangrove. I guess I call them like forests around each of the different keys out there, kayaking on the ocean. That was it's also one of the largest. I think it might be the largest key out there. So you actually get a little bit more room to spread out a little bit. So yeah, that was a personal favorite of mine. What about you, Liz?
Well, if I can say this one, because I could live there if I could, the Dolphin Research Center.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was just hanging out with the dolphins. Yeah. They're so adorable and smart.
Fantastic. All right. Final question, and then I'll let you off the hook. All right. After working on this series, when you think about the Florida Keys, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Okay, I think the first thing that comes to mind is a moment when Jason and I were just setting off on maybe one of our very first interviews, and and we hit it off immediately, by the way, that, it was like, it was such a good working relationship. But, and cause and again, this is the first project I'd done without my husband. And, so still recovering from that grief, but you get on that highway, and the gorgeous ocean on either side, the blue sky above with the clouds, the mangrove islands to the side. For the first time since my husband died, I actually felt I was going to make it, and that, kind of like the Keys, anything could be possible.
Driving across that bridge, I've done it in a convertible with the wind going.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing like it. And if you don't have a convertible, put those windows down a little bit. You will appreciate it. That's my tip. What about you? What about you, Jason?
Yeah. Well, when I think of the Keys first, I always come back to the moment when we'd been working on what our theme would be for the podcast throughout the entire trip itself. And we had this thing where every time we talked to somebody, we would ask them to try to describe the Keys in a couple words, not really knowing what we intended to do with it. Maybe it would be like an audio montage at some point, which still might happen at some point in the podcast, or maybe it would be just influence how we describe different places. But we ended up just picking a combination and some of our own, creativity on top of that of, adapting some of the words that were used. But the moment when we figured out exactly what the theme would be, we were on the way back, I think, from
kayaking at Big Pine Key.
Or that's what it was, kayaking, because it was I think the last key, the last word that we needed came from Bill while we were out on the ocean itself. We said the combination of the words that we knew were going to be the right ones. We high-fived each other in the car going across the 7 Mile Bridge, and I just felt that rush of like, we figured it out. Normally you come back from these trips and there's still so much to put together. Like, you just have such a wealth of information and audio and interviews, and you kind of have to like sort it all out. And still there's going to be a ton of that goes into each episode, but to have that key piece in place, it just felt like the whole trip was coming together in that one moment. And we knew, and by that point in the trip too, we had our routine down, and we knew how every day was going to go. We had such a good rapport going. So it just felt like everything fell into place in that one moment. And that's what I always think about. And that's what the Keys feels like to me now in retrospect. It's just that realization, that comfort, and that excitement for the future.
Perfect. Fantastic. Oh,
we are bad at these lightning questions, though. Yes. We like to talk. I'm sorry.
No. That was absolute perfection. I am not shy. I am not shy about cutting people off. Trust me. So, not a problem. As a matter of fact, I wish I could talk to you guys forever, but I do want to make sure that I give you guys a chance to tell me about any events or anything else coming up that you want to promote while you're here with me on the mic.
For the Keys?
For anything. Fantasy
Fest comes up in the fall, and Goombay in Bahama Village, I believe, is just before Fantasy Fest in October.
I've never been. I've been to Mardi Gras in New Orleans 3 times, and I've never been to Fantasy Fest. Have you guys been?
No,
would love to go back for it.
Yeah. Maybe we'll go back and tape it.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so if you guys go, and I'm dead serious, if you guys go, will you invite me to come with you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's a deal.
At least meet up. Let's plan on.
We'll share some stone crab with you.
I'm dead serious. If I find out, and I will be able to find out, because I've got spies everywhere. If I find out that you're there and you did not tell me you're going to be there, I will be very, very hurt, and we're going to delete this episode from the podcast.
Fair enough. No, we definitely will. And it's whatchamacallit. Yeah, like you don't even need too many spies. It's just not that big of a place. You could post up at the one road and see if we're ever driving by. So
there you go. Duval Street.
No hiding.
Street.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And you'll probably find me. I forget what bar it is, but you'll probably find me at that one place where I'll be doing karaoke.
There you go.
Now, and where can people catch you and follow you guys on social media? Because I want them to find you everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know if we have anything particular set up for the show itself yet. A lot of our content's being shared by Newman PR and on the Florida Keys, different websites, FLAkeys.com. You can find the Armchair Productions accounts. It's just like at Armchair Productions for more information on this production and future and past productions. We've been all over the country, hoping to go all over the world. You can find content that we've recorded in Oregon and Tennessee, doing the Tennessee Music Pathways. We've done Yolo County, California. We're heading to a bunch of cool new places over the course of the next year. So there's a lot more to listen to. And hopefully, if we are lucky, we will be collaborating with Liz again. So you'll find more adventures of Jason and Liz on the road, hopefully down the road.
I hope so too. And my social media is just, I'm not hugely active on social media, but I would love to for anybody to come visit. And it's just at Liz Harryman with a Y.
There you go. All right. So we're going to put all those links in the show notes. I thank you guys so much. This has been so pleasurable. All right, Amber. That's my producer. All right, Amber. I get it. I get why you were so excited because I'm totally jazzed. I was texting her behind the scenes, like, I love these guys. I was texting her during the interview. So thank you so much. I'm buzzing because I'm feeling highly motivated. I already knew that I wanted to take my significant other to down to the Keys because she's never been. She's from New York, and now I'm even more convinced that I need to take her down there. And but maybe we should instead of driving straight to Key West, we should make some stops along the way, and you guys will inform that.
Definitely.
So I really, really appreciate you guys. Thanks for being such amazing guests, and I hope that our fresh mixers really, really have been motivated to go and explore the Keys more. I just want to just sing your praises. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
A great pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Fresh Mixers. I hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did and as much as my producer knew that we would. And for those of you who have been to the Keys, I hope that it inspires you to go back and that you learned more than you ever even knew, because it totally expanded the breadth and depth of my knowledge of this place that I've been to, primarily with a singular focus to just hang out, have fun, and not to do a lot of thinking. Okay. But this interview made me think a lot. And the one thing that stood out for me with respect to this fresh take is I thought it was very poignant the way that Jason brought up the Keys being the end of the road for some people, like literally. And they both talked about how, the Keys is a place where you can literally leave it all behind. I mean, think about how beautiful that is metaphorically. Like, you're living whatever life you're living. If you want to leave it all behind or start anew or start something better, you can literally get on I-95 and just travel south as far as you can go. And there's, and I've seen it. I've taken pictures of this. There's a marker at the most southern place in continental America, in the Keys. You could take a picture next to it. It's this big rock, okay? You cannot drive any further. So if you want to drive to the end of the road and see where it takes you, what kind of better place, what a more welcoming place could there be than the Florida Keys? I would dare to conjecture that some people have taken that drive to do something drastic because they felt that they were at the quote unquote end of the road of their life. But once they reach the end of the road, if there's any place in America that might convince you to turn it all around, it's the Florida Keys. You've got the weather, you've got the people, you've got the Keys motto, one human family. Take that drive to the end of the road. Nobody will know who you are, and you can just start anew. But I really love that the Keys is a melting pot of so many different people, so many different cultures and ethnicities and views on life. And it is just so very true. The potpourri of human beings and life experiences that Elizabeth describes. I've seen it with my own two eyes. I've experienced it. And I was not joking when I said that I've never met an unkind person in the Keys. There's no snobbery. It's not like being in South Beach or in LA or New York where there are ropes, before you get in someplace. Sometimes I feel like Miami Beach is like the rope capital of the world because you got to stand behind a rope to get in places and people have to let you in. In Key West, no ropes. Everybody is welcome. There's no dress code. It's all about relaxation and happiness and being cordial and kind to your neighbor and learning from each other's experiences and doing whatever the heck makes you happy. So what I took away from this is a beautiful, healthy reminder of the essence of what the Keys is. And that's acceptance and joy and the freedom to be whoever it is you want to be or the new you. And that is my fresh take. I'm looking forward to you listening in on the next episode of the Fresh Mix podcast. Please tell your friends, especially if they're Floridians, and please go and rate us wherever you find your podcasts. I prefer 5s. I'll accept a 4. And bring people together because we've got to stick together as Floridians. And I really appreciate all the support. Take care and have a good one. For details and show notes about today's show and our guest, go to freshmixpodcast.com. The Florida Podcast Network has a closed Facebook group for superfans of their shows. Just search for FPN Insiders on Facebook. And you're more than welcome to just go there and complain about how Florida has such schizophrenic weather. But I must say, usually when it rains, unless it's a hurricane, it doesn't rain that long, right? And then the sun just comes out. But I had a really weird experience last weekend. I went to the zoo. I was at what's called Miami Zoo, which when I was a kid, it was called Metro Zoo. And I haven't been there literally in a couple of decades. All right. And I loved the zoo. I loved it. And I saw tigers and leopards and monkeys and all kinds of stuff. But then all of a sudden, this monsoon of rain came. And I told my best friend from 6th grade, who I was with his little 5-year-old daughter, that, look, this is Florida. It's going to end right away. Wrong-o. It lasted so long and I could not believe it. I was like, is this Hurricane Ian? What's happening? Anyway, I was complaining about that. I don't know what's happening. Is it climate change? Was it extremely bad luck? When's the last time you saw it rain for a really long time in Florida when it wasn't a hurricane? I'm just saying. Anyway, please be sure to visit all the great shows at floridapodcastnetwork.com. Keep catching Who's Fresh in the Florida Mix with Florida's Fresh Mix podcast.